Hello, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to Connect Africa, our bi-weekly session every Tuesday and Thursday. I am here with Kwame Gonza to bring you a depth of analysis on the topic of the African Anglican Church separating from Church of England. Why is that? Is something that we are going to look into. Is it related also with other things, with the state? There are so many questions that are going to be raised. Yeah, so stay with us and we are going to talk about it. Everything that we know, we will bring it to you. Welcome, Kwame, once again.
Thank you so much, Mahlet. We welcome you all, our viewers who are watching us. Greetings from Connect Africa. There's no other way to put it, but we want to thank you for being with us. And of course, there's no other place to be apart from here. So if you are tuned in and watching, definitely try and press the like button and share, because the information we are going to share today is very important. So share this broadcast with other people so that they can come on board if you are watching right now, because it is very, very important. We are going to look at the church. This is an important institution, but we are seeing that the church is breaking within itself, and in particularly the Anglican Church. So the church is breaking. The African Church, Anglican Church, is breaking away from the Church of England, which has been like the patron or the mother, which is the mother of the Anglican Church. It is because of difference in opinion, in difference. It is because of difference in how they are viewing that the direction of the church should be. So these are the things which we want to look at. So we will look at briefly the history of religion, and then we will see how the events that are happening within the church are related to the other events that are happening on the political, landscape, in the political space, in the political sphere. So these are the things which we want to examine today. So with that being said, try and share the video with other people. Connect Africa, we are not here just to talk about things, but we are here to analyze in depth, the events that are happening and are affecting the continent of Africa and its people globally in depth. That is what we are doing here, when it comes to the programs that we are doing. But we don't even stop there. We don't stop there. We go as far as doing the work itself. We are engaging the African Union on the other side. We are engaging the various Pan-African organizations, and we are on the ground running with petitions, in different ways. So that is why I'm asking you, come on board and support the channel, subscribe to the channel, because there's no other way, there's no other where, or there's no other place to be. This is the place to be, at Connect Africa is the place to be. So try and support the channel as much as you can, because there's no other organization which is doing what we are doing right now. But we applaud all the other Pan-African organizations and what they are doing, whether it's the Uhuru Movement, the African People's Socialist Party, the Kwame Nkrumah Ideological Institute, the Economic Fighters League, of Ghana, the Africans Rising, all these organizations, the All Africa People Revolutionary Party. Go out there and support all the organizations, but come out here and support the channel and the work which we are doing. If you have to contribute something, reach out to us, send a message in the comment section, and then we will reach out to you. Thank you very much. And I want you to prepare to enjoy the program and get yourself educated with what we are going to present today. Thank you very much, Mahlet.
Thank you very much indeed for that welcoming and a kind of reminding our viewers what they need to do as they watch they watch here. Yeah, thank you. Please do share the information. We are mainly here. It's an education. We prepare before we come. We do our research, and then we bring the information, because information is power. That's what we can do for Africa, for for our brothers and sisters to awaken. So yeah, everybody can do something in whatever opportunity they have. Now, as we always do, before we go to the main question, I think it's good. Kwame, can you please give us a brief history of the Anglican Church and its relation with Africa in general? How it is set up in Africa, how it is established?
First of all, Mahlet, I want to play a little video so that our viewers can get a background of what we are trying to talk about really. So I would be glad if you can help me to share on the screen. Briefly, our viewers will be able to appreciate what we are going to talk about.
Polygamy as a normal way. We had polygamy as a normal way of marriage, and every man had 3, 4, 5 women, and they chased their wives because of the gospel. And now, when we hear a message that, okay, now even a man can have another man as a wife, or same-sex marriages is also marriage, we get disappointed that those who brought the gospel to us are turning away from what they brought to us. So our message is, for us in Uganda, we still keep the gospel in its totality. We cannot embrace liberalism and Confucianism. So we just call upon Archbishop Justin to repent. And in July or any other given time, they should really reverse the decision they made, which is destroying the Anglican communion. They should reverse. Otherwise, that really is so sad in his time as an Archbishop of Canterbury. Is not in Canterbury. The way to heaven is in Jesus. So we don't need to be worried. If now there is no going in Canterbury, no. We don't have any scripture to say unless you go in Canterbury, you cannot go in heaven. No. So we need to, like for me, I was made a bishop in 2008 in October after Canterbury and GAFCON. But I found GAFCON so enriching and rewarding, and there's friendship, and found they really stick to scripture and revival. And for us in Uganda, because of the coming of missionaries and teaching the Bible, we got some younger men and women who were persecuted and burnt alive. They put in fire for the gospel. Because of the gospel that was brought by the missionaries from England. So we cannot betray those men who were killed for the gospel by going backward. And in Uganda, we have what the June 3rd, Martyrs' Day. 45 men were burnt singing for Jesus because of the gospel that the British brought to us. So now when we mess up that, we betray those men and women who were killed. So GAFCON is putting us in the real image of the gospel. We are ready to defend it. We want to go back and teach our people to follow the Jerusalem Declaration, to stick to the Bible, because that's the word of the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. So, can you hear me, Mahlet? So, yeah,
Yes.
that is it. Yeah. So, I just wanted to give our viewers a background so that they can understand what we are trying to talk about. Now, I'll go to the question which you asked and said, you asked me, can I try to give a brief background
Yes.
of the church itself or Christianity? Of course, I cannot give the whole history in 2,000 years. I would spend here another 2,000 years, talking, word by word, event by event. But of course, I'll try to go through it, quickly. So what we are witnessing today is that we are seeing this organization, which had a conference in Kigali. uh, uh, they called GAFCON. The organization is called GAFCON, the Global Fellowship of Confessing Anglicans. This organization has differed in understanding of the word of the Bible, in understanding of the Bible and its interpretation. And these differences have been there, in numerous times. And that is why we have seen many times Christianity breaking up and, different sects being formed. It is because of this difference in opinion, in many cases, for certain reasons. And so this is also what we are witnessing here, that the Church of England in the United Kingdom, which is the mother of Anglicanism, or what you would call Protestantism, is breaking up now. Why? Is because the Europeans have taken their values, what they call their way of life, and that is homosexuality, and they are injecting their way of life in the church. And they had not done this originally, even though they had injected in certain other values, like when you come and talk about monogamy against the polygamy, like how the bishop Samuel Kazinda, who was speaking, was mentioning. So he mentioned that Africans, for example, had 2 wives, 3 wives, 5 wives, and when the missionaries came, they told the Africans that it is bad to have those 2, 3 wives, marry only 1 wife. So that was an European value. It is not to mean that there is no Africans who had 1 wife. Of course, there is many of them who had 1 wife for certain reasons. But even those who wanted to have more than 1 wife and they had the ability, they could go ahead and have the wives the wives they wanted to have, 2 or 3 or 5, for certain reasons. So what we are pointing out here is that European values were injected into the Christianity doctrine. As you can see, the Romans, for example, the Romans, the Italians came and injected, their values, and that is why you see that Roman Catholicism is filled with certain rituals. When you go to their church, you see that there is rituals which are being performed there. But when you go back to Rome, you see that originally those rituals were performed within the general culture of the Romans as a people. So when the gospel came to Britain, also these people, they injected in their values, the English injected in their values, and then the same thing which we are, as we are going to see. So what we are seeing is that those values they are being rejected right now on the global stage. And so even in Africa, you can see that the church in Africa is asserting itself. We have mentioned this on various, on numerous times, that in Africa there's going to be reasserting of the culture itself. And it is after this breaking away of this African church, this African Anglican church, and also whatever other Christian churches which we have, whether it is the Catholics, whether it is the born again Christians, and all the other groups which we have. It is after that breaking away from the European system that we will see the Christian church in Africa taking on its own nature, and then African values will be injected within the African church. So briefly, to go back to what I was supposed to answer, when we look at Christianity 2,000 years ago, when it came from when it came from Egypt, and it came from or India, and it arrived in the Middle East, Christianity took on a certain characteristic, that when you examine, as historians like Dr. Ben, who is an African historian, have examined that Christianity, when you look at its roots, it has its roots in the cultures of Egypt, of course, which was majorly Africans, and then they borrowed certain also characteristics from the cultures of India, and they put it together, and so as a doctrine it entered the Middle East. When it entered the Middle East, that is where it came from the areas of Palestine. Then from that area it went to Rome, in that period of 1 AD, after BC, immediately after 1 AD, that's where we hear about the Romans in the Middle East. And then later we hear about people like Alexander the Great, the so-called Alexander the Great. I will not call him Alexander the Great because we are not very sure as Africans about his greatness. So then we hear about the Caesars and Alexander the Great in Greece. Greece falls down, and Roman, the Romans come up. So when the Romans took Christianity, like I said, they went and injected in their own values within, until we had people like Martin Luther, who was a German, who opposed the Catholic Church because of the monopoly it had over the religion, the Christian doctrine, and to the extent that they did not allow people even to use the Bible. The Bible was considered a holy book that even the common Christians were not allowed to read it. Only the fathers and the sisters were allowed to touch it. Actually, only the fathers and the bishops and all those guys, they were the ones. So Martin Luther opposed this kind of thinking and this kind of doctrine, and he said that people should be allowed to touch the Bible and read it by themselves so that they can be able to understand. And when he broke away, that is how the group which was called the Protestants was formed, and they ran to England. So this is the history and how it happened. So when the church reached England, then it took on a different nature. So when the church was in Rome, because Rome during that time was considered the center of Europe, that is why you see that when the Catholics came to Africa, they came as forerunners of people like the Spanish and the Portuguese, because those were the first colonizers to come to Africa to take slaves. You hear of Cape Coast in Ghana. These were all Elmina Castle, in Ghana. You hear of Cape Town. Okay, these were Spanish. Cape Town, in South Africa, Fort Jesus, in East Africa, in Mombasa. So when you hear all these were the Spanish and Portuguese who came first. So the forerunners of these Spanish colonizers and Portuguese, they were the what? They were the Catholic, priests. they came with the Catholic priests. So even when that gospel went to England after the fall of Spain, of course, and the fall of Portugal and the fall of Rome, you know, England took on the superpower status during that period. So England also came with its own church, which was the Protestant church. Hence, you hear places like Uganda, Kenya, the Anglican church dominates over in those places, because that is where England had its colonies. Majorly its colonies were domiciled. So when that gospel now left England and it went to the United States, it went with the people who went to the United States, what they were calling the new land which they had found, the land which they had discovered, the New World, the so-called New World. When they went to the United States, then when it reached the United States, the English went with it. And when they reached there, because of the nature of the land in the United States and the requirements and the needs of the people during that time. So again, Christianity was transformed into something else during that period. That's why you have the so-called prosperity gospel in the United States. These are all transformations. So what I'm trying to point out to you is that Christianity as a doctrine has been transforming depending on where it is. And why has it been transforming? It has been transforming because of the culture in the place, in a certain region. That is why Christianity has been transforming from different ways, or what you would call reformation. It has been reforming itself depending on the place where it is, or with the people, depending on the people with whom it is. And so they have tried to adopt it to their own needs. So when you go to the United States, because there was a lot of announcements across Europe that when you go to America, America is the land of prosperity. These are the words you would hear. So that is why you see that when you go to the United States, then you hear that this is where the gospel of prosperity majorly comes from, because United States was considered the land of prosperity. When you go there, you will become rich. Even up to today, that is the mentality today that has occupied many people's minds, that even Africans, majority of Africans and all people across the globe, that America is the land of prosperity. So Christianity, when it reached there, it took on that nature. And then they started preaching the prosperity gospel, because the culture in the United States was what dominated people's minds during that period, was the mention of prosperity. Prosperity, we are going to the land of prosperity. So the gospel itself, which came from there, had to be the gospel of prosperity, because America during that period, even up to this time, the only thing it identifies with is prosperity, prosperity, riches. So that gospel now was transferred from the United States, and it is the one which has come to Africa as a new form of gospel, born against Christians, Pentecostals, and so-called Church of Latter-day Saints. So various groups, as the Christianity has been transformed, have been using this Christianity for their own interests, actually. Like how we saw the Spanish and the Portuguese used it to get colonies in Africa. The British used it to get colonies. The United States also, apart from transforming it to fit them, they have also tried to use it to further their domination of the world. Hence, you see groups like the Mormons. You look at the Church of Latter-day Saints, for example. You look at Church of Christ. All these are emanating out of the United States. So all these are attempts to try to transform this Christianity and use it for their own gain as a people. And if you actually examine Kwame Nkrumah's book, Neocolonialism, The Last Stage of Imperialism, he points it out how, for example, the Mormons were coming even to Africa in the 1960s and discouraging people in Africa, for example, and the global south from saluting their flags and joining the army, because they thought, the United States thought, and the United States, of course, is behind. The United States is behind. It funds all these organizations, these Christian doctrines, because it understands how they are going to benefit the United States. So they were discouraging people from joining the armies, saluting, the flag. People were very patriotic and even joining the army. So they were discouraging these people. Nkrumah mentions it in his book, Neo-Colonialism, the Last Stage of Imperialism. Specifically, the summary of that book is in the chapter called The Mechanism of Neo-Colonialism. If someone wants to read it, it is free online. You can Google it and read it. So that has been the nature of Christianity. So when the Africans took it, for example, in the United States, they are the ones who tried to transform Christianity for the benefit of the blacks. And so they formed, for example, the African Methodist Church. The African Americans tried to transform that Christianity to suit and to feel like it is African. To feel that it is African, so that it is not exploitative. So what I'm trying to say is that Christianity can be adopted depending on the people and to suit your own interests. Unfortunately, in Africa, on the continent itself, is where we have not had the opportunity to hold it and transform it for liberation purposes on our continent. We saw that people like Martin Luther King Jr. In the United States used it. They used it through the Southern, I think it was Southern Leadership Conference and the NAACP during the Civil Rights Movement. It was the Christian churches, the Black Christian churches, which mobilized the people, the African Americans, the African people in the United States, to get some sort of relief from segregation. It was through the church. So they used Christianity. So in Africa, unfortunately, because places like the Church of England and the Catholic Church in Rome have still held our continent, they have still had a grip onto the church in Africa. So that is why you see that our church has not been able to transform itself to advance the interests of the African people. So in some way, you can see that it has continued to advance the interests of the colonizers, the interests of Europe, the interests of England. And so when we see these things happening right now, it gives us hope. It gives us hope that now the church, the African church now is decoupling, is trying to separate itself, from the Church of England. And this gives us hope that the church may start to look after the interests of the African people. Thank you very much, Mahlet. So I think I've answered your question when we are talking about the brief history of the church.
Indeed, I think you also have touched the question that I was thinking to ask you as a second question. But really, thank you very much for that background. It really, puts us on the same even level, like ready now to grasp what we are going to discuss. That we'll have a fair understanding, all of us, with this background. Great. Let me just view some of what our viewers were commenting. Sinovia Indigo say, who are they to dictate to a race of people who have their own culture? CNS said, when the Pope of Rome failed to allocate colonies to the English decided to break away from their own church, the Anglican Church. Again, Sinovia says, the USA Constitution was created for Caucasians and not African Americans in mind, and it will always be that way. Yeah, okay. Now we move.
Yeah. First of all, let me say greetings to Synovia. She's always, on the channel supporting.
Yeah.
Greetings to you, Synovia, and yeah, we love you. Share the channel and invite other people so that they can come and learn with us, so that we can build this movement. We are building a movement. We are not just building a place where we can, get people with clickbaits, and we are not trying to clickbait people. We are trying to build a strong movement. We are up to something here, and that's something that we are up to is for building a strong Africa and a strong Africa for the African people. Absolutely, that is what we are trying to do over here. So we are not just talking, for the purpose of talking and throwing up words and to excite people, but rather we are putting out this information because it is important. We are analyzing the state of the world today in relation to Africa and the Black people across the globe. That is why we are saying that if you can support all the other Pan-African organizations, we are not saying you should support only us, but you have to support us. You have to support us. Even if you don't want to support us, you have to support us, because we are doing the work out there. We are on the front line and we are doing the work. So if you can support all the other Pan-African organizations, because they all work towards the same goal. They are always also, they are all working for the benefit of the Black people. So when we work and we meet, all of us are coming from the bottom, we meet, to the top, then we have all contributed to building a strong Africa for all Black people across the globe. Because like Malcolm X said, there's no Black man that will be respected anywhere across the globe. If Africa is weak, if Africa doesn't become strong, there's no Black person who will be able to be respected anywhere, regardless of how much money you have. You can be Oprah Winfrey, you can be Michael Jordan, you can be LeBron James, you can be Jay-Z. You have had all these people being disrespected on numerous occasions because they are Black. And why are they disrespected? It is because Africa is weak. So that is what we are working towards. That is what we are building, together. If we work together, if you join us on this journey and support us, then we will be able to finish this work quickly. We will be able to contribute to this work quickly, and we will do the work faster of making Africa stronger and giving it back to the African people to control it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you. It's not only Synovia, but also there is CNS. Definitely. Now, speaking of, how those missionaries, the first missionaries, also for the case of Ethiopia, is the same. I think it was first the Portuguese missionaries who came to the country. It's always those missionaries were not only a missionary of religion, but they were also working as diplomats, like they were handling the foreign relation work of their country, whom the government sent them purposely to do two things at a time: to Christianize in their own way, and then also bringing message from the government and taking. And they were also, a third thing is also they were also a spy for their own government. They were spying on the country they are sent to as a missionary. So there was a lot of things that they were handling. Now I want to ask, if you have touched it, but if you can elaborate, if can you point out, for us, how this church in some way if it has been a tool for continued domination of the global south, of course, Africa included in it, and that's where our focus is, how it has been used as a tool for the domination of those powers or those countries who have been colonizing Africa.
The church absolutely was very, very instrumental, and as you said, even when you go to the missions, because the first place which they established when they came on the continent is the churches, which the missions. For example, the missionaries established the Catholic missions. Okay, these are the places, the spaces which they established first, even before establishing administrative offices on the continent, colonial administrative offices on the continent. They first established these missions, missionary missions on the continent, to say that they have come to help. And it's just the same way how you see today, they say they have come to help in form of giving aid with their multinational organizations, NGOs.
Totally.
Yeah. So the tactic,
that's correct.
so the tactic is the same, but what is the major objective? The objective during that period in which they were saying that they are coming to rescue the Africans from heathenism, they are coming to liberate the Africans from heathenism and teach them the word of God, as if Africans did not, know the word of God. And yet we find that the people who were claiming that they are teaching Africans, the word of God, were much more corrupt. Some of, some of them were drunk. Some of them used to rape our women when it comes to the continent. So they acted as forerunners of the colonial system. Why? Because they had to soften the burden. I mean, they had to soften the hearts of the Africans so that the Africans would not fight back. Hence, they used the statements like "turn the other cheek." They emphasized, they chose out certain verses from the Bible and emphasized them. For example, that when an enemy slaps you on this cheek, then you have to turn the other cheek. So these are the verses which were majorly emphasized in the church. And they used to say, slaves, you should obey your masters, obey your masters. Okay? So they would choose out verses which suit them to continue their colonization. And even when you go to the Caribbean, when you read books like The Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James, he shows it out to you that the people who were actually saying that they were priests and they were baptizing the slaves were drunk people, to the extent that even if you wanted them to baptize you twice, as long as you had money and you gave them, they would take money from the slaves, actually, the slaves, whatever they had, so that they would be baptized. When you go and read that book, The Black Jacobins, by C.L.R. James, who was from the Caribbean. So they were corrupt themselves, that they were not really so much interested in making the lives or saving what they call saving the souls of the Africans, but they were looking out for their own interests. That was the first thing. Number two, they were advancing the culture of the Europeans, as we have already seen that this religion came with the European culture. Even up to now, what you are seeing that the Africans are rejecting is because the church is trying to push the European culture of homosexuality onto the Africans, that the Africans are rejecting. Now, I would like to correct the Archbishop Kazinda a little bit, that what he said, that when they came, they brought us, the Europeans brought us this, and they told us that you should not marry one wife, and you should not marry, you should not marry two wives and all that. Maybe what I would say is that there is certain things which were existent already in our culture. Like, of course, rightly he mentioned that our men used to marry various men and many men. And other people have mentioned actually that they were mentioning that it is the Europeans who taught us how to persecute homosexuality and all that. But that is something which we disagree with majorly, because this was in our culture, that we do not allow such acts in society. Now, other people have argued that these things were there in our society. For example, homosexuality was there in our society. Of course, it was there in certain cases, because there is certain people who are born that way, it is alleged, but they are not a group of people. They were once, they were one, I mean, it was once, such a case occurred once in a while. Just like how you see albinos are born once in a while. Okay? Maybe an Aphrodite is born once in a while. That maybe someone is just what we call a deviation from the normal. Nature once in a while deviates from the normal, that you can see a child is born with 6 fingers. So it was there once in a while, and such people were separated from society actually. They were not celebrated as some, as what is being done in the West. And those people, sometimes they would build a small house for them far from the normal society, how it is operating.
Yeah.
But they would not kill them. They would build for them a small house. They would stay in a certain area. They would not want them to associate with the general society, but they would not kill them. They would feed them. They would give them food. They would give them, they had rights in society. And this is where actually the difference is the difference is in all our society, that in Africa we have a different view, but because the Europeans are not willing to listen to the side of the Africans, then that's where the Africans have a problem with them. Because the Western world has an arrogance that they don't want to listen to the Africans. The voice of the Africans, they don't want to listen to it so that the Africans can explain their position. Then they go around and make noise because they have access to the media. They have all this arrogancy and noise which they make all across the globe, and they have their media which goes on spreading negative propaganda out Africa, about Africa. So they continue to go in that direction. But what they have not understood about Africans, like for example Uganda, which has just passed this law yesterday, prohibiting homosexuality, is that they are spreading, of course, the propaganda about this law, that it is going to kill, it is a dark day for homosexuals, what. But this is not what this law is saying. It is because they have not read. They take ignorance and they turn it into, some sort of circus and source of propaganda, and they spread a lot of lies across the globe. But what the law is saying is that we do not allow the promotion of this behavior. And it goes way back to history, that we do not promote these things in our society. But the law is not saying that it is going to kill those people who are found like that. But it is said that if you promote it, among children and you are caught, because what has come to be understood is that these people now, they are coming to promote it. This is what the law is prohibiting. It's saying that you cannot promote these things here. For us, we consider it as a deviation. So if you differ from us, this is what the president of the land has said, that if you differ in thought from us, leave us, we will find out by ourselves that we are wrong. We will find out if we are wrong. But don't come here and impose on us and say it is urgent, as if this is an urgent issue that somebody is dying. We must impose it on you, must do it now. You see, so this is where the difference in opinion is. So the Africans are majorly saying that we don't kill people. There's no group of people who knows more about human rights than Africans. Because we have gone through the worst forms of brutality, at the hands of these same Europeans who are coming around to preach about human rights. So we know so much about human rights that we even forgave them, these people who brutalized us. We forgave them, that we did not fight them, we did not kill them. Some of them we have allowed to live with them, like for example, you see in South Africa, and they were supposed to be punished. We were supposed to retaliate. So it shows you that the Africans know so much about human rights compared to the West. And so in this case, we see that the Church of England has attempted to move in that direction, to push the narrative, the negative narrative of the European culture and the Western culture and the negative narrative of its political system is what has continued to push, just like how it did during the colonial times, that they were pushing their values on the Africans. So this is why we see that in some way, the church, actually in a major way, in a very big way, the church has been instrumental in pushing the European culture and even being a forerunner of the colonial system within the global south and specifically in Africa.
Thank you. Thank you, Kwame, really for that. It's really interesting also to see the dynamic here on the chat section. People are so engaged and yeah, it's really nice. I just want to read some of them. CNS says King Leopold later to the missionaries gives all the details on what the missionaries were really meant to do on the continent. It wasn't about the gospel. The letter can be found online. So for those of you, including myself, who wants to read that, you should Google and read it. Learning. Sorry, learning. That's the most important thing. That way we can also bring light in terms of information to our siblings, to our relatives, to our family, and with the group, with the networks that we have. Somebody asked, okay, I sent email for that. Connect Africa, what is your email for the future, for future projects and topics of interest, which may be forwarded to you? Asante Sana says, yes, we encourage also others to do that. Thank you. So yeah, you can email us with the address that we wrote there. Now, you know, what came to my mind is now as you speak, how the church and the state is connected. Recently, we have seen Uganda passing that bill anti-homosexuality in their parliament. There was a lot of noise from many countries, celebrities and politicians. The mainstream media was going wild against Uganda. And, you know, those so-called international institutions warning them that they are going to deny them loan, aid, or whatever. But this shows how much the state and the church is connected. So perhaps, do you think that, you know, for the Church of England to embrace this, such practices that are, you know, as the African person there from Anglican Church said, which are against the scripture or Bible, for the church to allow it? Do you think there's an influence from the politicians, meaning in these Western countries? Yeah, if you can shed light on that.
Yeah, I think, yeah, what I think actually is that because the Africans, the political class has failed. The political class has failed. And this question actually connects back to the previous answer which I gave. Because the political class has failed to push this narrative, there has been a lot of resistance in Africa. So they decided, what I'm saying is that they decided to revert back to the original institution which used to help them. And that is the church. So that is how it connects back to the previous question which you asked. Is the church connected to the political system in any way? The church, we mentioned that it was the forerunner of colonialism and all colonial policy and all colonial systems and colonial values and European values, and planting them onto Africans. So because the political system is collapsing in the West, is dysfunctional, and they are seeing that, and they have tried, actually, the politicians have tried to push it, and it has failed in Africa. And actually, this is one of the ways of population control, of how they want to control Africa's population. And many people, of course, that have spoken about this, they know this. Many people know this. And because Africans have refused, they have rejected it. So they have decided to revert back to the original institution, which was the forerunner of softening people's hearts, of softening the hearts of the Africans. And then they will bring in and bring all the garbage and unload it on the Africans. But right now, what they are finding is that even the forerunner institution, which was the church, is facing huge problems right now, that the Africans are rejecting it now. Hence, you see that the Archbishop of the Church of Uganda, Bishop Kazinda Samuel, he rejected it and said that if it means that we don't have to go to Canterbury, because the Church of England has its headquarters in Canterbury, he said that if it means that we don't have to go to Canterbury, Canterbury is not the way to heaven. So these are words of someone who has asserted themselves. These are words of a group of people who are asserting themselves. They are asserting themselves and saying that we don't need you anymore. We do not need you anymore. So that is why we are seeing this. But of course, the institutions, as we have mentioned, and we have seen from Nkrumah's writing, when you look at his book, Neocolonialism, The Last Stage of Imperialism, which was written in 1965, the institutions in the West are interconnected. They are almost all run by the state, whether you're talking about news houses, media houses like the BBC, you have seen it, that it parrots the line of the colonial British class, even the church and the businesses, the financial institutions, they are all connected together, that what they do is to push the narrative and values of the Europeans and supplant them onto Africans, to plant them on the Africans and supplant our own African values and kill them and destroy them. And that is the only way they can continue to dominate the markets of the Africans, the minds of the Africans, always to brainwash us and say only European things are better. So if you want to buy, you have to buy European things because they are better. The African things, discard them. The African religions, discard them. The African clothes, discard them. Buy European clothes, they are the best. Buy European cars, they are the best. So this all is connected, and is the reason why you see that the Church of England as an institution, of course, is in the days past, even the leader of the Church of England was King James. It was the king who was the leader of the Church of England. So they are very much connected, to answer your question.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you, Kwame, for that. Now, of course, our interest is Africa. That's where our interest lies. And we have talked about on various events here at Connect Africa regarding the changing world order and how African leaders or Africa is asserting itself. It's into that culture of, as you so many times you said, there's this culture of asserting your culture. So asserting itself in terms of for what they stand for, the principles that they stand for. For example, the recent conflict resolving method used to resolve the war in the northern part of Ethiopia, which was led by the African Union, was one example. And then we can say the vote that the Africans for so many rounds in the United Nations related to the Ukraine-Russia war, whether it's abstaining or saying no or whatever, that also said a lot. That's what made the US to panic and said, send many of its officials to the continent and revise their foreign relation, and changing even officials in the White House administration, those who are handling the affairs of Africa. So this is all because Africans are, asserting themselves. Now, we are saying this is a different one. The religious leaders, as we have seen the bishop of Uganda saying that, of course, Canterbury is not the way to heaven, in separating from the Church of England. What do you think? What can we make out of this, if you can, compare and contrast for us between the state of the church today and the political realm regarding what's happening in both institutions when it comes to instability?
Thank you very much, Mahlet. So what we are seeing is that fortunately for us as Africans, is that the events that we are witnessing right now, actually, which have come as a shock, and some of the things we have been speaking about them since 2020. If you go back to both of our channels, Connect Africa here, and if you go back even to my channel called Africa Reimagined, and you examine, we have been speaking about these things that are happening. It's only now that they are speeding up, the events speeding up, that what is happening in the church now, that it is separating itself. We have also seen it in the political realm, that Africans are trying also to separate themselves. And it is because of the realization that these Europeans are not special. These people are not special. And Africans are saying now, why should these people continue to load it on us? Why should these people continue to print dollars and claim that they are giving us aid when they're just printing common paper? They are just printing money. They're just printing paper and coming to us and saying they are giving us aid. For example, if you look at the United States, since the COVID period, it has printed more than $7 trillion. And that's the money which is, of course, in the IMF that they are giving around Africa as loans. They just printed it. They didn't get it from anywhere. They didn't work for it. So they just printed it. So these are the questions which Africans have started asking. Hence, you hear people like President Paul Kagame of Rwanda asking questions and saying, why should these people print? In Africa too, we can print and do the same thing. We can print with our money.
Yeah.
Africans and form a union, a strong union of African states. Then we can print all how we want and also build our infrastructure without asking for anyone. Why should someone print money from somewhere else and bring it to us and give it to us, and we give him our resources for free? So these are the questions that are being asked now. So these are analogous to what is happening in the political and these events that are happening both in the political and the religious realm within the church also. They are analogous. They are connected. They are similar. It is all because the West is going down. There's a decline. There's a rapid decline, and a lot of people have noticed this decline. So this is what we are seeing now, is just an acceleration. So all the events in Ukraine, China rising, Brazil, working with China, Russia working with China, Argentina, countries wanting to join BRICS, all these which are happening within the geopolitical space are very similar to what you are seeing that is happening within the church itself. That people now are realizing that we have to do things for ourselves. We don't need some white guy to come around and tell us he's going to do this for us. We must do this with our political system. We must do this with our economic system. And so you see the church too is saying that, no, why should the Church of England tell us what to do all the time? Do this, do that, now apply homosexuality in the church. We don't believe this. So this, we are going to continue to see it. You saw that President Ruto a few days ago, during the Mo Ibrahim governance weekend in Nairobi, which happened in Nairobi at the Kenyatta International Convention Center, President Ruto mentioned and said, why should Europeans continue to summon us all over? So it's the same thing. It's the same thing. So these things are connected. And so we Africans, we just need to get our act together also and be more assertive. The civil society as Africans, that is why Connect Africa here is also working with other organizations to strengthen ourselves, to work to strengthen the African civil society so that we can support those leaders who are, pushing for the interests of the Africans.
Thank you very much, Kwame. Really beautifully laid out. I think it was easy to get it. As I always say, I learn a lot, even if I read and prepare to come here, and we do a lot of back and forth conversation before we come here and join you on live stream. But still, I learn a lot, and for that, I give you that credit, Kwame. Thank you. There's always new things that you bring for us. Now, this will be our last question. I see, Sinovia, you have sent a question to Kwame. I will ask him if he can share his opinion on it. But our last question for today is, let's see, Kwame, maybe you will tell us if it's better to entertain what came from Sinovia, or quickly tell us, because this is my last question, what is a way out of this mess?
Yeah, I think you mentioned Sinovia's question. I'll put it all together and respond to it.
So shall I read her question? I
Yes,
say her
yeah.
or his, I don't know, but let me just read. At Kwame Gonza, do you think homosexuality is part of Euro culture, or that there is a higher percent of Muzungu people who are born as homosexual? If so, why?
So just to answer the her question briefly, so the Mzungu have naturalized it as their culture to be homosexuals. They have made it a part of your culture. I mean, part of their culture. Sorry, but we as Africans, we have not naturalized it as part of our culture. Hence, you see that in places like in places like Uganda or East Africa, and majority of the African countries actually, they say that this is not part of us, and so we don't want it promoted. So the contention actually between the Africans and the Europeans today is about promoting it. The Africans are saying we do not want to promote it. Do not promote it. We do not promote our values as Africans. So hence, this value, this homosexuality as a value, as an European value, is not in our culture. But what we are saying, what I explained, is that once in a while, maybe once in 50 years, once in 20 years, there can be somebody who has that behavior in society. But that person is isolated in society. In some cases, is cancelled. In some cases, the person is not encouraged to be where other people, because they do not want that behavior to be contagious. And that is what the Africans are even saying even today, and saying, we do not want this thing to be promoted in our culture. We do not want it. And if you want to promote it, you will get problems with us. So if that person has been identified that they are in this behavior, we will try to help them so that they can come out and their mind will be changed. What the Europeans are saying, we will continue to promote it, and we want that person to stand on their pulpit and announcing that they are homosexual. And this is what Africans are not agreeing with and saying, we cannot accept this. So this is the difference. So it is not part of our culture. And that's why we are resisting it and saying, no, we cannot. But the Europeans, they are doing it. They are pushing it because they have an agenda behind. And that agenda is for depopulating the African continent. And this is why they came here. When you go to places like Kenya, where they chased the Europeans out after the Mau Mau defeated them, they had occupied the Kenyan islands, for example. In South Africa, they just allowed them, Mandela allowed them, but they wanted to push them out of South Africa. They had occupied Belgium. I mean, the Belgians had occupied the Democratic Republic of Congo. But after independence, after defeating them, they had to pack their things to come out of there. So they wanted to occupy the African continent, like how you see they went and killed the people out of Australia, the indigenous people in Australia. They were black people. They killed all of them and took over the land. New Zealand, Canada, the United States, all these places were occupied by indigenous people. They were not occupied by these Europeans. So it is a tactic. These are tactics which they want to use to occupy the African continent. And they will go as far as they can to use these tactics to promote something which is abnormal, an abnormality, and make it into a normal activity so that they can have as many people doing it as possible, and it will help to reduce the population. But it is not, in the normal sense, it is not a way of life for the African people. These people are just promoting an abnormality for an agenda. There's a hidden agenda behind, hence they come and promote it, even and fund money to those people who can promote it. Because if it was just a value, which is a good value, there would not be any need of promoting it with money and giving people money so that they can engage in it. But we have seen that they are recruiting people, giving them money, they should do this and that. And because our societies have problems with poverty, which poverty they have contributed to, the Europeans have contributed to this poverty that we have by looting our resources and colonization and continued robbery and impoverishing our people with their organizations like the IMF and the World Bank. Then they have an opportunity to impose these deviations, this deviation of values. So just to answer your question, Synovia, it is not an African value, but it is being definitely promoted across, and the Africans are rejecting it.
Just one correction. Thank you, Kwame, for that, reflection on the question. It was Baruti Katembo's question, actually. It wasn't Synovia's. So I make that correction. But just to add on my opinion, of course, we are sharing this one on personal opinion and things, based on what we read. So I also read it's sometimes our own observation can be enough to analyze things. Some Africanist researchers have said that, and I have read it is also, for the question if it's inborn, homosexuality is inborn, that with the vaccination that children get, because this vaccination, we have seen a lot of videos of Bill Gates and others, those vaccinations, what they in their own country in the West, and also what they send to Africa, are not really to do the purpose what it's supposed to do, meaning healing or preparing you if that sickness cuts you. But they say that there is a thing that is given with vaccination as well, and you can see it. For example, me in my own age, 15 years ago, I'm an Ethiopian, and cancer was not that familiar. You don't hear it in hospital or in media or anything, or diabetes also, it was there, but it wasn't as much as it is now. All those diseases, it has to do with us, Africans importing, the culture as it is, the food, the vaccination, and everything. There are a lot of factors around it, why we were not hearing it many years ago, and why we hear all these types of cancers now in our country. It used to be in the West, but now you find it. So it's just to do, what did the country do? What did the population started to use in those past 2 decades or whatever? So it will direct you. Definitely, it has to do a lot with importing those cultures to Africa. It's not to say right or wrong, but these are what are out written there and published as well. And you always, for any information, we can always do more additional reading and take, what make balance, which weighs the scale up for us, we take it. Yeah, this is what I think. So yeah, you can address the last question, Kwame, the way out. You are muted.
Yes, the last question you asked, you said, how can Africa get out of this mess? Absolutely, we as Africans, we have to be very assertive. The African civil society recently at the conference which happened, the Mo Ibrahim Governance Summit weekend, which happened in Nairobi. One of the things which Mo Ibrahim, the African tycoon, mentioned was the empowering of the African civil society by, of course, the progressive African leaders is important, so that the Africans can demand accountability from their leaders. But I would say that as Africans, we have to be assertive. As Africans, civil society, as African civil society, we have to come out and start fighting for ourselves, because in some cases, the leaders are chained that they cannot, act in the interest of the African people. And even in all ages, actually, liberation has not come from the existing political system, the status quo political structure. That is not how normally liberation comes. Liberation normally comes from the people on the ground, from the civil society. So it's important that if we come out and call on you, the African civil society, you have to try and respond, because the work which we are doing here is a major part of that liberation process. The conscientizing of people, the bringing of knowledge is part of that process, because we are trying to bring the different people who are out there that they don't understand what we are talking about, to the same level that we are, so that we can move together. So if we say support the channel, this is part of that contribution that we are supposed to be doing. We have to work together. We have to talk to each other as Africans, and we have to move together. So this is the only way we can go out of this mess as Africans. So with that being said, I would like to thank you. I hope my light has not gone here. We have power challenges. So we have to work together, and I'll add from there next time as when we come back. Thank you so much, Mahlet.
Thank you very much, Kwame. I mean, thank you. The power authority in Ghana has blessed us. You have been here until the end, just in the last minute. I mean, you have delivered everything. So yeah, thank you very much. And thank you all for being here, for your questions, your comments. As Kwame said, please go and share if you like the information that you have got from here. Like it and share it. And for any, I mean, we will soon come, we will update our channel so that you will be able to support as you watch. But until then, for any type of support that you want to do, please contact us via our email. And yeah, thank you very much. We will see you again next Tuesday with Kwame. But in the meantime, we will release various videos. So yeah, thank you. Thank you, Kwame. Have a good evening. Thank you, everyone.
Have a good evening. Thank you very much, Mahlet.
Bye. Bye.